Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Larry.
Welcome to Manopod,
A podcast dedicated to men over 50.
brought to you by manopause.com. Hi, and welcome to Manopod Podcast. We have a very special guest today, John Tarnoff. And John, bear with me. I have to read this because this is a lot of stuff and I don't want to miss a thing. So
cut it down.
You are a career coach, a film producer, a writer. You are the co-founder of Village Roadshow Pictures, the head of show development for Dreamworks Animation. Right there is enough. But wait, right. There's more. The founder of Boomer Reinvention, a career coaching program, and author of the bestseller, Boomer Reinvention, How to Create Your Own Dream Career After 50. Wow. That is amazing. This is a great book and can't wait to get into it.
Let me use this opportunity now to have you structure for the audience and for us your 5-step framework, because I think We've been talking about it, but more in generalities.
Yeah.
Why don't you take us through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you can?
So great, I will do that. And this has gone through some more practical changes, but the 5 steps are this. The first one is reframe your idea about who you are, how the world works, how you used to work, how you work in the future. Really, it's back to intellectual curiosity. It's back to really thinking differently about yourself. And the second step is listen. Get feedback. You may be surprised to learn from close friends, longtime business associates. You may be surprised to learn how they see you in the business context. This may be a great time to get some really actionable and in some ways uncomfortable feedback about how you're perceived and the work that you've done. And then the third, and really in a way the most important aspect of this is accepting. The idea that we've all made mistakes. We all have bridges that we've burned. We all have abuse that's been done to us in our job. We've gotten fired.
We
need to accept
things like that. Yeah,
we need to accept that the past is the past. What's done is done. I did the best that I could. I've learned a lot of lessons, and now it's time to get closure on all of that past and be able to move on. Because if you don't, you're going to bring that baggage into every single meeting that you have. And you're going to be in an interview and you're going to get the question that's going to be uncomfortable for you to answer. And if you don't answer it with complete transparency, humor, and a sense of acceptance, you're not going to get the job.
Yeah.
So once you get those 3, what I call reconciliation steps out of the way, then the next 2 steps are ideation, which is, I call this the express step, where you get to express to yourself and others what it is that you do want to do. This is the value proposition construction part of it. And LinkedIn is this great platform to use as a sandbox and a marketing vehicle to share this expression of your value with the world. And then also with LinkedIn and beyond LinkedIn, you need to connect with the people out there who can refer you, connect you, introduce you, give you more feedback, and put you into those positions where you're going to get hired, you're going to get funded, whatever the business winds up being.
So connection is an interesting subject. Once again, I think there's a lot of people who would scratch their heads saying, well, how do I do that? How do I connect? I mean, LinkedIn is one thing, but how do I connect? What are you talking about? Who are you talking about in my particular case?
Right. So it all comes down to this fear that we have about selling ourselves. And I can't tell you the number of people who say, oh, I can sell anything, but I can't sell myself. And this is a limiting belief. You got to go back to reframe that limiting belief, because here's the truth of it. If you have a value proposition that is personal, authentic, valuable, and most of all, useful, then you don't have to sell yourself a day in your life. because you wake up every day knowing what it is that you are trying to do, what you are working towards doing. So talking about that is not selling yourself. It's not trying to persuade someone to buy something. It's you sharing your enthusiasm about the change that you offer can make, the vision that you have of the work that you want to do, the impact you want to make through the business that you want to do. That's the only selling involved. You need to get into conversations with people so that you can share with them what it is that you want to do, and that you're looking for opportunities to do that, to connect with people who can help you do that. And in the process of connecting with others about your value, you're also looking to learn about their value so that you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
In your networking process, I like to say you never want to lead with your need, right? You want to always be giving in your networking process. You want to figure out first how you can help others, and then in the process, they will try to help you. So
that's good.
Right. If you have that value proposition, you know what it is that you're talking about every day, then it's just a question of meeting friends, finding your tribe. And once you've found your tribe, there's a whole world out there of people who think the way you do, who share your values, share your ambitions and goals, and are more likely to connect you because you're one of them. They're one of you, right?
Right.
And you're trying to connect to others who are doing the business the way you see it done, which means, remember I was talking about fit, that's how you find your fit.
Excellent. Wow. So menopause.com is, it's about staying young, to living young, to following your passions.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt you?
Sure.
So I'm on a whole rant about this living young, being young thing. 60 is not the new 50.
70.
Right? 60 is the new 60. And this is not about staying young or being young. Young is what we used to be. We are now in a much better place being old. And I'm going to use that word. I love the word old because
Wise.
old is wise, experienced, mature, accepting, connected to the value of life. And I want us to all reframe this idea of being youthful. Someone sent me a really wonderful little story the other day about this writer, the famous old French writer, who said that, and in the interview, the interviewer says, "You have this youthful quality about you." And the writer says, interesting, he says, when people, he said it this way, he said, I knew I was getting old when people kept telling me how youthful I was. Because there's this contrast of expectation. We expect older people to be diminished, out of touch, low energy, unengaged. And that is not the case. I don't think any of us on this call would be confused with the typical picture of an older person. So I think we need to redefine what growing old means, what being old means, and start to define it in terms of old as a good thing, old as a life stage that we all aspire to, because we can do great things from this perspective.
To Mike's point, though, the concept of young or youthful in our description and our movement is not wearing super tight suits. It's not, it's not trying to, run a marathon if you've never run a marathon and stuff like that. But we all know people in their 50s or 60s that are old people.
Yes.
Old in the conventional sense,
yes.
Right?
And people in their 40s.
Yeah, they're winding their lives down, right? And they're like, okay, well, I guess, I don't really have much to do anymore, so I'll watch TV or I'll do this. And we're saying, no. That's what our live young means. Our live young means you were young, you can still be young. And by young, we don't mean the cliche of young. We mean your life goes on until it doesn't. And
Right.
so keep on living the way you were living.
Keeping on.
Right.
That's right.
That's right. Keep on working. Keep
Right.
on traveling. Keep on swimming if that's what you do. Golfing,
Right.
running, buying cool cars. That's what we mean by living young.
And following your passion
Right.
is living young.
Right.
It is. Why are we here? Why is Larry and I here today talking to you doing Manopause? Why? Because when we met 14 years ago at a restaurant one night, we just said, well, what's your passion? Larry's was writing. Mine was producing and acting and doing that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And we said, well, why don't we try to recreate that? Why do we have to stop? Why can't we just, in our last stage of our lives, recreate that, follow that passion? That'll keep us younger, keep us, our brains going. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. And it's great.
Pause so you can go, man, go.
That's it.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, to get back to your
framework.
The book is critical, I think, for people to read the book and kind of understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
The other thing, though, is that you do offer more in-depth, more personal kind of counseling.
Yes. So I am a career transition coach, and I work with people one-on-one and in groups to help them through this stage, really. And whether they're coming out of a long period in a job and they are actually trying to find this next job, or they are in the job and they're kind of seeing the exit, or they've lost their mojo and are trying to figure out what they want to do, or they're thinking even longer term and trying to figure out how to find more meaning and purpose in the job that they have. They're trying to maybe even reinvent themselves in the current job and find a greater connection to their value. That's the work that I do with people.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think somebody who would use this service, one of the questions they might ask is, again, what we were talking about. You were talking about, find people, find like-minded people, or find your tribe. And somebody, again, might say, I can go on LinkedIn, but how do I do something like that? I can't just randomly call people. They're going to think I'm a creeper, right? So, you give advice on, well, what did you do and where were you and how many friends do you have and where do you live? Then do you sort of put together, say, well, how about this? Go see this, go do that.
All sorts of techniques around this, around building a network. I was at I remember I was during the book tour, I was in Chicago, and a woman in the audience raises her hand and she says, how do I start a LinkedIn network? And I said, well, are you on other social media? Do you have a Facebook page? She said, no. I said, so you have no online presence whatsoever? No. This is 2017. And I said, okay, do you have friends?
No.
I said, of course I have friends. I said, do you have business colleagues and associates? Of course. I said, well, then you need to connect to all of those people on LinkedIn, and you start there. And I will bet that you have at least 100, probably a couple hundred at least, people that you can connect to and establish your LinkedIn presence through those 100 or 200 people. And here's the thing about social networking, and specifically about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is its own different animal. It is not Facebook. It is not like anything else in the firmament of the internet. Those 100 people that you are connected to, they are connected to another 100 people, probably another 500 people in many cases. So you have the ability to connect out through your second level. These are the second level connections. You have the ability to connect out to that entire universe of people. And that is the easiest way to get this process going. And part of the work that I do in my one-on-one and my group programs is focusing very specifically on the techniques of building the network on LinkedIn and off LinkedIn to find that tribe and to engage in these conversations. So it's easy to do. I'm doing this with people all the time, every week. It is not rocket science, and it is not personally difficult. People think, "Oh, I'm scared to do this." You know,
well, that's the key.
It really is
that's
not one of those things.
Yeah,
that is a very erroneous, limiting belief. It's not hard to do. You start with the people that you know, and then you get introduced to the people that you don't know, and then I had a woman I'm working with right now who is right here in this process. She has 150 people, no longer. She had 150 people on her LinkedIn, and she was saying, "So, you know, how do I do this? And I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm more comfortable doing this way or that way, whatever." Anyways, look, here's a technique. Try this with 5 people. See what you get. Well, all 5 people connected back with her. She said, "Should I connect with that company that turned me down for the job last year?" I said, "Sure." "Well, I'm uncomfortable about doing that." I said, "Well, think about it this way. You don't know why they turned you down. They're also professionals. You know, you had good interviews with them. There's no real reason why they wouldn't connect with you. And because they actually know you, you've been in the room with them, they might now think, oh, you know, we didn't hire this woman, but she was good. Maybe I know someone who she should be introduced to." Sure enough, there were 3 people at that company. They all connected back with her.
Wow.
Because guess what? Great. We're on LinkedIn to network. We're on LinkedIn because we want to take advantage of the platform for our own careers and our own businesses. So why wouldn't we want to connect back with someone who is a reasonably accomplished professional, not a stalker, right? Not a crazo, like, you know, someone maybe on another social network. Right? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. What's your website? Because we're going to put that on the screen.
Sure. Website is johntarnoff.com.
Oh, that's easy enough.
And you can find me on LinkedIn at John Tarnoff. It's one of those names where there's not a lot of us out there, so I haven't found another John Tarnoff. Anyway, so it's all John Tarnoff. I'm on Twitter at John Tarnoff. I'm on Facebook at John Tarnoff Coach. And connect with me.
And you do hourly? How do you coach personally?
I work in multi-week sprints. The initial program is an 8-week sprint where we cover, on the one-on-one program, where we cover all of the main foundational pieces of this in terms of the reframing and listening, the value proposition, LinkedIn profile, the networking, and then the piece that is the kind of the cherry on the sundae for all this, which is about thought leadership. And thought leadership is really that practice that you use as a kind of a branding practice around the important subjects that you are that you stand behind to help further the business that you're in. So if you have I'll give you a funny example. So I'm working with a guy who comes out of the satellite cable business and was kind of in a DirecTV the very early years, and chief counsel kind of guy, succession of various jobs, is kind of coming out of a kind of a semi-retirement to kind of go back in and be an advisor. And I was talking about thought leadership. I said, so what are some of the topics that you think are really interesting, that where the business is going? People aren't talking about this enough that you would want to weigh in as an expert on. He said, oh, I know what that is. He said, space debris. I said, what? He said, space debris. He said, it's a huge problem. There's so much stuff floating up there and no one's doing anything about it. And it's going to start colliding with other satellites, and you know, none of it, a lot of it doesn't burn up in the atmosphere the way you think it does. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. That's a pretty niche topic, right? So there you go. That's thought leadership.
You know, age is really just a number. I can still roar like a lion, dance like a star, and run like a frightened schoolgirl. That's right. I'm a menopause man, over 50, sure. Slower and grayer, perhaps. Hairier in places, well, sadly, yes. But I still have a lot of living to do. So join me at menopause.com. It's a site for men over 50, chock full of stuff like sex, health, money, travel, entertainment, sports, and did I mention sex? Menopause.com. Come on. Ooh, feel that breeze.
But let's start at the beginning. Larry, why don't you ask John the first question?
All right. Well, there's so many questions we're going to want answered. But let's start with
tough right off the bat, man.
Here, let's get them. Let's
start with a basic one. So your life has been about adapting and reinventing and finding passion in your career and life. Now, you started off in the entertainment business, as Mike just elucidated. What drew you to that in the beginning? Why the entertainment business?
I was always drawn to film and photography as a kid. And my mother, I think the story goes, she got me a toy camera at some early age, and she took it away from me because she said I kept taking pictures of the sky. But I persisted, and they got me a Brownie when I was 8, and I still have those initial pictures from when I was 8 years old. And it all just kind of went from there. I started editing my dad's home movies when I was a teenager, made little films in high school and college. And one summer I went on a TV commercial crew in New York City. We had a neighbor who was an ad agency guy, and he got me into this company. I was lugging camera boxes around Central Park in 90-degree heat and 90-degree humidity, and I just loved it. And I thought, wow, this is for me. I love being on a set. I love the whole process of film going through the camera and the magic of creating content out of nothing. And that persisted through college. And I was from New York. I came out to California to go to film school. Lasted about 2 quarters in the UCLA MFA program because I really want to go out and get a job. Yeah. And it kind of started from there. I got a job working in film distribution for the first couple of years, nothing I had ever expected I was going to do. It served me really, really well as a foundation for understanding the business. Then I got a job as a literary agent and did that for about 4 years. Another great way to get an entree into the business side, something that I always recommend to young, budding entrepreneurs and professionals in entertainment, because you really get to see how the sausage is made. And then I got into the studio business, and that was kind of my 80s career, working at MGM and Orion Pictures, and producing at Columbia and Warner's, and for a couple other little independents. And then the 90s was my tech sabbatical. I kind of hit the wall in movies. It's a hard business to actually get stuff done. You spend most of your time trying to get stuff done. And then eventually, hopefully, if you're lucky, you get to make a movie now and again. But that can be a pretty debilitating process. And tech was starting to take off. So I got into CD-ROM early on, produced a couple of titles, including the CD-ROM game based on the movie War Games, which is a project that I'd worked on when I was at MGM and UA. And I happened to be having lunch with the director, John Badham, who was a friend, and he was also a computer nerd like me. And we kind of came up with the idea of, let's go pitch War Games to MGM. And we did, and they went, oh, it's a good idea. So we made that. And then I got into a company with a partner, and we did some really crazy stuff. We were really at the bleeding edge of technology. We started a little company, raised money to do kind of a mixture of artificial intelligence and behavioral animation. So these were little animated characters that you could type questions to, and they would understand and talk back to you. And this was for customer service.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of like Siri with a face years before there was a Siri.
Was that before the Microsoft paperclip?
Oh, we used to get teased about that a lot. So we were to the paperclip the way, I don't know, a 747 was to the Wright brothers flyer.
Right.
That was kind of some kind of analogy that we put into it. We got a big deal with Sprint to do a customer service character for them. We did some other characters for other brand name companies. We did some stuff for AT&T and Progressive Insurance and Scottrade, and then of course 2001, everything collapsed. The spring of 2001, everything collapsed, and then 9/11 happened, and it was just terrible. So the company went away. We went from raising the millions and having 50 young people in a warehouse in Venice, developing away, back to nothing, back to me and my partner working out of his loft apartment in Venice. And at one point he says to me, well, I guess the future's gone out of style.
Good. That's good.
That was the end of that. So and here's what's good. I'll kind of like monopolize the conversation and really kind of get into the pith, the meat of it here in terms of what you guys are talking about. I turned 50 in 2002. I had this startup that was tanked. I didn't want to go back to the entertainment business, to those production executive jobs that I'd done. I'd kind of lost some currency. I really wasn't interested in doing those jobs anymore. I didn't think I could get hired in those jobs anymore. And I didn't know what to do. So I decided I was going to go back to school. I knew of this psychology program at University of Santa Monica that was kind of catering to professionals who were in a life transition, looking to develop some mastery around their sense of self and engagement with the world. And not that I was going to go out and become a coach or a counselor. Ironic how these things work out. But I felt that I needed some kind of reset. And it gave me a great reset. And I wound up going to work, as you mentioned, at Dreamworks in 2002, 2003. And I worked there through the rest of the decade in a very different role from what I had done before. So before I was all about content, script, packaging. This was about people. And it was a great company to do that because it was old studio model. It was everyone goes to work. Everyone is making different movies. It's not this kind of hire a crew and put everything together. The intellectual and creative plant was there. And they were scaling up. They were going from one movie whenever to 2 movies a year, then eventually 3 movies a year, which was too much. It's hard business, animation. It's much more complex than live action. I learned a tremendous amount, and I was working on people development. Redid their internal artistic and technical training program, did an outreach program to schools to recruit young people because they had not done that before. They really had this kind of steady state group and they needed to expand. And it was a phenomenal experience. I loved working there. And then everything changed. 2008, everything changed. The economy changed. Katzenberg, I think, realized that he had a very difficult model. The company had gone public, but it's really hard to keep a public company going in entertainment if you're making 2 movies a year. Both of them cost a blank load of money, and they both have to be hits. That's kind of insane. So he saw the handwriting on the wall and realized that he needed to downsize the company a little bit, needed to trim it out. He needed to really focus on the franchises that they'd built up: Shrek, Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon, a couple other things that were in the pipeline. And I saw that my role was going away, and that all of this kind of progressive, futuristic stuff about talent development, all that was kind of not on the radar anymore. So actually, one day I thought, okay, I gotta be proactive about this. So I went to see the COO, Ann Daly, who I reported to, and I said, look, this is a strange question, but is there anything left for me to do around here? And her face kind of got bright red, and she leaned back and she said, oh, I don't know what to tell you, but probably not. The truth is, probably not. And she said, and having said that, we love you. You've done an amazing job here. You've made this amazing contribution, but where you've been focusing, it's not on our radar. And I said, okay. She said, look, take some time, talk to everyone, see if there's something else that appeals to you, appeals to them, works in where we're going. And let's see if we can make something work. And I did, and there wasn't. And so, right. So we engineered this really respectful exit for Hollywood, kind of insane, right? To kind of walk out of there under these kinds of circumstances and essentially being not fired, but being let go, really, from a job that I loved, a company that I loved. I would have loved to stay there, but it was not a good fit anymore. So remember that concept. And I thought, okay, now's the time for me to go out and really do my own shingle and to take everything that I've learned about psychology and people and this whole evolution of technology and education and create some kind of a consulting practice at the intersection of entertainment, technology, and education. And I did that for a few years and had some really interesting experiences and consulting clients. And then I did a TEDx talk in 2012. Am I kind of spieling too much here, or is this entertaining to anybody?
It's so interesting that we feel like it's a TED talk right now, and this is great. This is perfect. This is what we're looking
you can
for.
cut the shit out of it if you want, but anyway.
The only thing I wanted to point out before you go any further for the audience, is there's two types of, I think, job lives.
Yes,
there's the person that gets a job at a company and works there for 30, 40 years. They may advance, they may not advance, but it's their job, whether they like it or not. And then there's people like you. My dad was like that, where, jobs kept coming and going, and it had to be a reinvention of yourself. And that, I think, as you tell more of this story, is what people should be focusing on is, if you're in either kind of job, because you could be in a job for 30 years and they let you go and you don't have the experience you had of landing on your feet versus other people who have had the similar experience where they've had to jump around and try something new. So I want the audience to kind of keep in mind that you're going to be talking about both of these kind of situations.
Well, and really the bridge between those two mindsets, right?
Yes. Right.
Because a lot of people that I work with have come from those persistent long-term positions and are ill-equipped to deal with this transition. And we'll talk about this. So briefly, I will talk about the TEDx.
All right, hold on one second. I just want to mention that Larry and I come from two different backgrounds. I mean, Larry is that 30 to 40 year career guy, stays in the same job, year after year after year, a steady Eddie guy. For him to start getting into the menopause thing, it was a big break for him. I'm not speaking for Larry, but for me, it's kind of simple because I went from job to job to job to job. I thought I was going to start college and I decided, screw college, I'm going to get right into my career. And then I did one thing after another and I failed many times during this, but then I was successful many times. And so I hear you. I kind of fall into the same, areas you do. So tell us about TED Talks.
So just briefly, I was asked to do this TEDx talk, group that I had keynoted for when I was at Dreamworks. And I said, what's the topic? And they said, the topic of the day is transformation. I said, oh, so you want me to talk about all of the changes in entertainment and digital and streaming and all that? They said, you can talk about whatever you want. And this is 2012. So I've been reading about how boomers were having a really hard time recovering from the recession. People were underwater on their mortgages. They had lost 30 or 40% of their nest egg and living longer and ageism and no jobs. So if we can't afford to retire, how are we going to keep working to be able to save more so that we can eventually afford to retire? And how do we deal with that, this kind of business cultural phenomenon around age and, oh, you're too old, you're too expensive, you're too out of touch, get out.
Hi, Mike and Larry here, inviting you to spend some time at manopause.com.
It's a website dedicated to men over 50 and the people who love them.
That's right. articles, videos, podcasts, and a community forum, all here at manopause.com.
Hey, are you tired of everything from movies to fashion always being aimed at millennials?
I know I am.
Well, at manopause.com, we focus on you, guys over 50, with stuff you care about.
Like sports, sex, humor, health, entertainment, and business. It's all here.
Manopause.com.
Manopause.com. It's about time. Join the movement.
Drawing from my own experience, having this kind of serial connection of jobs through entertainment and the psychology background, I came up with what became this 5-step process to really take back control of the career process and stop relying on the system to feed you the jobs. And we can talk about that in more detail. But that was really the genesis of the coaching, because people kept coming up to me afterwards and saying, "Oh, so do you coach people around this process?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I guess." And that's what led to doing this. And then the book became a necessity, because I realized that both for me and for people interested in this process and in kind of conquering this dilemma, there needed to be a framework. There needed to be some reference for how this works. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to do a kind of a deep dive inside myself for my own process and figure this out, put it down on paper. And that was 2017. And I was, very fortunate to be able to launch the book on CBS This Morning, and we got a lot of play and went straight to the top at Amazon, yada, yada. And, here we are.
Wow. And again, to Mike's point about, I'm a surgeon, so that's why I've been in the same job all these years. And Mike is the consummate salesman / entrepreneur, right?
Right.
So I think there's a difference in mindset based on where you're coming from. Not to say that people who are in Mike or your situation constantly changing can't benefit because they might be doing things wrong. But certainly somebody in my position, let's say they've worked, like I said, at XYZ company, and for those reasons, or even more relevant, because of COVID, where companies are like, you know what? First of all, we don't need that many people. Second of all, we don't even need an office. So Joe doesn't need to wander in here with his bag lunch anymore. We'll just get rid of him. People from that side of the tracks, I don't think have the innate capability of thinking on their feet to say, okay, how do I convince somebody that they need me? Because they may not even be convinced themselves that somebody neades them in some other role, right? And I think that's where I think what you're teaching and what you're advising on is going to be particularly important to those people who either don't know what their value is or are afraid to market it.
Yeah. We are all victims of the industrial era mindset.
Yeah.
And that is the factory and the job of the worker. The factory defines the playing field, doles out the work, demands a certain allegiance, adherence to certain norms, and holds all the cards. And we are beyond that, right? Slowly but surely, we are evolving beyond that. Technology has disrupted everything, continues to disrupt. COVID was an accelerator of that disruption. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that now in the labor market. And it really is incumbent upon all of us to, like it or not, take greater responsibility for our own careers, because the system can no longer do it. And that's why fit is so important, because it really is about fit. And I say this to clients all the time who are bemoaning the lack of response, the arbitrary response that they're getting in the employment market, being ghosted by recruiters, lied to. I mean, the list goes on. And I say to them, look, as bad as it is for you and how unfortunate your experience is, these people are scared. Companies are scared because they have lost a sense of how to stay competitive, of what their business is or should be, or how to conduct their business. There are so many pressures that are hitting them, and they are flailing and reaching out, and the bean counters are saying, well, you got to cut, you got to trim it down. And you look at the reaction, reading a bit about this, the reaction to the pandemic. There are kind of three corporate reactions to the pandemic. The first one was, hold tight, don't make any sudden moves, just kind of breathe and we'll get through this, and we're not going to make any sudden moves one way or the other, and we will just manage to wait this thing out. That's number one. Number two was slash and burn. Reduce everything down, get rid of all non-essential initiatives, fire as many people as we can so we can stay alive, and we're going to hibernate and hunker down. And then when this passes, we're going to emerge. That's number two. Number three is, this is an opportunity. Let's get ahead of this. Let's figure out how we can quickly turn around and adapt to the opportunity and make sure that we do more than ever to innovate, to reach out to our customers, to forge a new path going forward so that we can maintain, actually grow market share, taking us out of this. Guess who's prevailing today?
Yeah.
The third one.
Yeah.
Right? Because the other two, certainly not number one to a certain extent, but number two definitely is now in serious danger of losing their business because they can't catch up.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And I would say that this is the same mindset that we need to apply to ourselves as individuals. We are now
my
at a
company
time.
did 1 and 3 together. 1 and 3.
Well, I think, but I would say
More 3.
more 3.
More 3.
I think depending on your situation, more 3, because it's not going to get any easier. There's no going back to the way it was. And I think, so case in point. So we went to a restaurant the other night, sit down restaurant in Pasadena that we went to for years, hadn't been there since COVID, went back out. All of a sudden, they have a kiosk ordering system. And you order at the kiosk, and then you go and you sit at your table, and they bring you your food. So
Perfect.
a much reduced experience. Food's still the same, food's good, the people are still nice, but there are maybe half as many people working in that restaurant.
And they're servers now, not waiters, right? In other
They're
words, they don't
servers.
Right.
booze
Right.
with you.
They're not taking the order,
Right.
they are serving the order.
Right.
Was it a high-end fancy restaurant or was it middle of the road type?
I would say it was like mid to high,
Mhm.
right? Not highest end, top flight steakhouse kind of place, but certainly on a 5 scale, it was a 3 to 4 on a 5 scale. So this is a linen napkin, silverware.
It's not the French restaurant, is it?
No, it's the Grand Orange. You know Grand Orange?
Oh, yeah,
Grand
yeah.
Orange and the luggage room. Yeah, the
Mhm.
luggage room pizza. So
Which, by the way, fantastic restaurant in case they're listening.
Yes.
yeah,
And we're not disparaging them. We're just pointing out how
Yeah,
they're surviving.
but this is the economics that we're dealing with,
Right,
right?
right.
So I predict we're not going back to full waiters at that restaurant. This is it.
Yeah,
And-
things have changed.
And a
Yeah.
lot of things that we're seeing, I think a lot of the supply chain stuff that we're seeing, yes, it will improve, but I think we need to get used to scarcities and fluctuations. And someone was saying the other day, I was listening to a report on this, that the supply chain system is very efficient, but very fragile because it relies on everything being in place. And once one element of the supply chain kind of tweaks out of sync, the entire supply chain collapses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of a Jenga construct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we're kind of going far afield, but I think this is about the way we need to think about our careers is very much in sync with what we see going on outside in this precarious, volatile, changeable economy.
So you talk about intellectual curiosity. I like that. Well, but explain that to the audience. What is that?
Intellectual curiosity is being proactive about the world around you. Mm-hmm. It's about taking greater initiative to understand things at a deeper level and to question what you know and what you don't know as an exercise in making yourself more resilient in your life and in your career.
Right.
So that you have more options and more ability, more control over the choices that are coming your way. So I think it was Barry Diller, former chairman of Paramount, founder of Fox Network, now for many years the
Blockbuster.
Early on in Interactive. He now runs Interactive Corporation, who said it's no longer enough to be smart in business. You have to be curious.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go beyond intelligence and think about what you're not thinking about, wonder about what you're not thinking about.
Right.
And you have to read more. You have to read different. You have to go that extra mile when your partner says, hey, let's go do this. And you go, I don't know. You got to go do it.
Right. Well, and in your case, one of the things that I think is also a potential roadblock to a lot of people is you re-educated yourself formally, right? By going to Santa Monica College and all that kind of stuff, because you're like, you know what? I want to do this. So I need to know this.
Right.
And I'm going to go learn about this.
Right.
I think a lot of people who, in both categories, the survivors and the steadfast, I think in both cases, a lot of them are afraid of the idea of having to go back and learn something. And I think, maybe you can address that in terms of, how do you get back into the mindset of saying, okay, I'm a student and I need to learn.
Right. Well, I think the mindset is that you have to be a lifelong learner, that education is now lifelong, and it's not about going back to school. It's about being in school all the time.
Right.
And part of that relates to, Mike, your question about intellectual curiosity. You've got to always be questioning and thinking about, what's the strategy here? What do I need to, what more do I need to learn? Who should I talk to? It really is about taking initiative and taking outreach. And the paradigm used to be, you got a good education. The good education entitled you to get a good job. And then you kept your head down and you worked for 40 years and then you got to retire. And that was the compact, right? Mm-hmm. That was the industrial era compact. And that went along for quite some time. But that's all out the window now because people can't afford to retire. They don't really want to retire. The whole picture has shifted. And so what I would say that the paradigm now has shifted into the first idea being not about education, because again, education is lifelong. You're always going to be learning. You're always going to be adding to your skills. The credentials that you earned in your 20s are fine, but they don't necessarily qualify you for what you need to be doing in your 40s, 50s, or 60s or beyond. Right. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go back to school. You can look at what you've done. Your ability can be your credential, which I think is why you're seeing a lot of tech companies kind of looking askance at advanced degrees, because just because you got the advanced degree doesn't mean that you know how to solve their problem.
True.
So if education is lifelong, then the first stage, I think, has to be self-knowledge, self-awareness. And you have to come into the jobs marketplace as a young person. This is a challenge for people in their 20s, knowing who they are, knowing what they're good at, knowing what they like to do, knowing how they work. And we also have to examine this, and part of the work that I do with people is looking at and re-examining that sense of who am I, right? More than what are my abilities, what are my skills, who am I? What am I good at? What do I love doing? What am I best at?
Well, the corollary to that, though, for menopause is men in particular at this age ask the exact same question again, right?
Yes.
Especially when they look back, and especially if, God forbid, they've lost their job or whatever, is like that the same sort of question. Who am I? What's my worth? What's my passion? Where am I going?
Right.
It's the same thing. It's just from a different end of the spectrum. And that's why, again, something like this is critically important to help them find that answer as well.
Right.
I think the boomers, and I'm in business with lots of employees, and I see the jobs that are changing are the millennials, that they are changing from job to job to job. You look at them cross-eyed, they quit and go get another job.
Right.
I would much rather hire an older person because I know that they're going to stay. They're going to not go from job to job to job.
Right.
They are steady Eddie. And so I'm really looking at that in my business now as, you know what? I don't care if they're 65, 70 years old. I don't care. I want them to be here for the next 3 to 5 years because that's important. And I know that the headhunters are out there stealing these young people left and right. They'll place them with us for 6 months and then they'll come back and steal them and place them somewhere else. Right. Headhunter business is a great business if you know how to do it, but it sure is driving the market crazy. So
it's part of why the system is broken.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's insane what's happening out there.
Well, from the employee point of view, you really have to work at, for all sorts of reasons, you have to end run that system. And I think this is true for people in their 40s, and I work with people in their 40s as well as in their 50s and 60s and beyond, because that system is trying to put you into a box. It's a skills-based box. And I like to say that skills are for kids, kind of like tricks were for kids. If you don't have any sense of perspective around the business that you're in, you don't have enough experience, skills are great because they can put you to work. You can get stuff done with skills. And if you're enterprising about it, you'll keep your skills fresh. You'll go learn new skills when new skills are required. But that's what the recruiter and the typical job description is addressing. It's a lower level, entry to mid-level position that's skills based. But once you get into your late 30s and into your 40s and beyond, it becomes much more than skills. It really becomes all of the insight, the strategy, the perspective, the understanding of what to do with the skills, how to manage the people who have the skills, how to really address the strategic future of the business that you're in. And so that's the shift. And you don't get that by applying to jobs on Monster or Indeed, because those jobs are designed for people with less experience than you have. I had a client once who hated his job. This is a guy who had a MBA from a top school and an engineering degree. He was in the automotive business. He was a consultant working for a nonprofit, hated his job. And he used to go home at night and he used to fire up the job boards. I used to call this job board porn because he was just like pining for these jobs and applying these jobs that he was not going to get. And I said to him, why are you applying to a job that's listing 7 to 10 years experience? You've got 20 years experience. Yeah, but I can do the job. Common saying from a lot of people. It's like, just because you can do the job doesn't mean that you should do the job or that they are going to believe that you can do the job. they're looking for someone with that limited experience for a reason. They don't want you. You are overqualified for that job. So
you're going to be a problem.
Yeah, you're going to be a problem. They're going to perceive you as a problem, and you probably are. Having said that, just a short parentheses on this. There are people, Mike, back to your point about people who are stable, steady eddies in their late career, who just do want to do that job. But you have to make that case to get around the kind of prejudice that you're going to be bored. You're using this as a bridge to get a more senior position. It's a chore to convince them, no. I've done all that. I don't want to go back to that. I've had my corner office. Now I really want to do this, and here's why. So that's a whole kind of a subset of the argument around this. But the point being is that you can't go in through this front door. You have to go through the hidden job market. You have to go through your network. And most of all, you have to start with establishing a really clear, really niche value proposition for what it is that you do, that you solve for. And the objection is, I can do anything. I've done this. What do you need? That's not going to cut it. Because the employer doesn't want a generalist. They want a specialist. They want you to be the solution to the problem that they have. They don't want to have to work so hard. They want you to solve it. So you need to come in the door and say, I've done all of this stuff, but here's what I do now, and here's why, and here's how, and here are the results that you're going to get. Here's how long it's going to take. Here's how much it's going to cost.
This has been really, really interesting. Really, thank you so much. I think we should probably wrap this part of it up. And will you come back again? Because I can see where this could be a series of podcasts that, No, but I mean, it's great. And can you show us the book again?
Yeah, sure.
It's called Boomer Reinvention.
Yeah, on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. And
Amazon, wherever toys are sold.
Wherever toys are sold. That's great. So thank you, John. And
thank you guys. It's great to be with. I love what you guys are doing with Menopause. I think it's great. Got to get the word out and kind of reinvigorate, re-energize men over 50. We've got a lot of life and contribution value left to share.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, John. This was great.
Yes.